All right. So our presentation today is on mindful and intuitive eating. So I don't know if you guys have ever heard about this before. It's actually kind of a funny thing. Like when I first heard about it, I was kind of like, oh, that's silly. Why do you have to put a name to really thinking about what you're eating? We all do it every day. But the reality is that we actually don't. We've kind of conditioned ourselves over our lives to not really be mindful of what we're eating and what we're putting into our bodies and our hunger cues and fullness cues. So this really all goes back to diet culture. So, we are constantly influenced and bombarded with all these different diets, the keto craze and Atkins and the cabbage diet. And I don't know, there's some army diet going around. So all these diets are constantly bombarding us. As you can see on the slide, there's this one that was put in a Vogue magazine in the 1970s. I know Jen's laughing over here by me because it's literally 1 steak, 3 eggs, and a bottle of wine. But at the time, they were fed this, and they believed that this was a diet that could help them lose weight and, be the skinny ideal that is kind of impressed upon us. And what, intuitive and mindful eating is about is kind of throwing that diet culture out the door and, taking back the idea of healthy. So it's not just about being skinny or having that body that maybe you've been taught to think is like normal or healthy. It's really about just being healthy for yourself and for your wellness, your longevity in your life, and not just to be skinny. So that's kind of what this image here is showing. You could cautiously track every calorie you put in your body and be stressed and anxious about it all the time. Or you can simply listen to your body and your hunger cues and, feel what you should be putting in rather than, tracking everything. And, at some point, tracking every single little thing, almost becomes an eating disorder in itself. But that's a whole nother topic for another day. So here's the definition of intuitive eating, a way of eating that encourages you to follow your internal sensations of hunger and satiety to gauge when to eat, what to eat, and when to stop eating. The concept of intuitive eating was created by 2 dietitians who wanted to help their clients escape the diet culture and develop a healthy relationship with them. So yeah, they really just were kind of like sick of all these diets that everyone's constantly being bombarded with, and they were like, stop, like we're not doing this anymore. Let's just be healthy to be healthy and not have these good foods and bad foods and healthy diets and unhealthy diets, and putting labels to everything really creates a bad mentality is what this comes down to. And mindful eating really goes hand in hand with this. So the practice of being mindful or paying attention purposely without judgment during meals has been found to actually rewire the brain's response to food, helping you distinguish between hunger cues and emotional arousal, therefore reducing maladaptive eating behaviors such as stress and eating. And it's funny that we even have to rewire our brains in this way, because when we're little, we know how to eat. Like you think about any toddler or little kid, you're like, eat, kid, why won't you eat? And they're like, I'm not hungry. They eat when they're hungry, and sometimes you're like, why are you eating so much food? But, maybe they're going through a growth spurt and they really need those calories, and we might not understand it, but they're really listening to our bodies. And as we get older, we kind of are almost taught to forget about those natural hunger cues that our bodies give us. So I know we've all been here with the bag of potato chips. You sit down, you're watching TV, you're eating from the bag, and before you know it, the bag's gone. So this is really the opposite. This is an example of distracted eating. And so what mindful eating really is all about is, preventing these types of situations where you feel like you've lost control and, don't really understand how this happened. So here are some mindful practices to live by. So at mealtime, first off, enjoy your company. So, you have your family and friends there, your significant other, whatever, sit down and enjoy each other's company rather than staring at the TV when you're with them. And that goes along with limiting distractions. So if you're sitting and watching the TV, scrolling through your phone, looking at your laptop while you're eating, you're not paying attention to how you're feeling and your body's hunger cues or satiety cues or lack thereof. So, being mindful means paying attention at mealtime. And this goes hand in hand with sitting rather than standing, because if you're standing, you're probably walking around, maybe cleaning and eating and doing all these things, and then you're not paying attention to your body once again. And then, last is, if you were engaged in a stressful activity before a meal, give yourself time to decompress before eating. And we'll talk a little bit about emotional eating later on, but when we are stressed or anxious or having any of those behaviors or feelings, we tend to overeat or eat maybe something we normally wouldn't eat, because we're allowing those emotions to control us and what we're doing. And using food to control hunger isn't necessarily, or using food to control emotions isn't necessarily the worst thing ever, but we'll talk later on about how to do that properly. And last is making peace with food. So there's constantly this is healthy, that is healthy, this is unhealthy, that is unhealthy. So what this really is about is kind of leaving those ideas behind and not letting them control you. Because when you are constantly label things as healthy, unhealthy, this, that, you get that almost like adrenaline of like sadness or regret when you eat something that you might have labeled as bad. And, you feel proud, but maybe deprived when you eat something you've labeled as good. And so that's what this is really about, is removing those labels to allow you to feel the freedom to control your hunger and cravings. And to go along with this, I put this study here, which I found interesting. So this was of 12,000 adults, 12,800 adults. That's a lot. They ate only homemade meals, and they were 26% less likely to be obese. And those who never watched TV during meals were 37% less likely to be obese. So, really being mindful is going to make you live a healthier lifestyle without really necessarily trying to do anything, without going on a diet, without trying to eat healthy. You're just being more mindful, and you're being healthier without even thinking of it. So this is such a funny question. Like, am I hungry? Like, I know we think we ask ourselves this question at mealtime, but do we really ask ourselves this question? So, this is important, and this is something that I want you all to kind of sit down and think about at every single meal. Try to make it a little habit to say, hey, am I hungry, before you start eating? And where is this hunger coming from? So once again, distinguishing between physical hunger. So when you are physically hungry, your stomach's growling, you're like, I gotta eat. I know me, when I'm starving, I'm starting to shake. I can't think clearly. I'm like, I gotta get food. Or emotional hunger, where you're just like, oh, I'm tired. And then you just start rummaging through the cabinets, and you realize, like, I'm not even hungry. Why am I rummaging through the cabinets, So that would be emotional hunger. And asking yourself, will I really enjoy this? So, around Thanksgiving, I was talking about the mindful eating, and I said, I don't really like turkey. So why the heck do I eat turkey every Thanksgiving? It's just because it's there and everyone else is eating it, and it's like weird if I don't eat turkey. But you know what? This year I was like, I'm not eating turkey. I don't even like it. Why do I do this? It's like a waste of calories. It's stupid. So ask yourself, do you really enjoy this? And that goes even if it's something that's healthy. If you don't enjoy that, don't eat that, because then you're going to be feeling deprived, and that's going to result in binge eating later. So we don't want to do that. So also, are you feeling physical hunger, or are you just eating because it's lunchtime? So this is something I think a lot of people, as we get older and get into the workforce, there's 3 square meals a day, and we're just like, okay, 12 o'clock lunchtime, I'm gonna eat lunch. But once again, ask yourself this question: am I hungry? Or are you just eating lunch because it's lunchtime? Or are you just eating because everyone else is? It's, once again, Thanksgiving, and everyone else is eating, but you're already full because you went to another Thanksgiving. Well, then why are you eating again? That's so silly. You're going to make yourself feel sick. And we don't want to feel sick. That's not a fun feeling. And lastly, if you are hungry, eat. So, conversely, people skip meals and allow them to get so hungry throughout the day that same thing, they end up binge eating when they get home, because they've allowed themselves to become so physiologically hungry that when they get home, they're kind of like, their mentality is like, I deserve this. So they just go home and eat everything in the pantry and wipe it out. So, you really don't want to get yourself to a place of, feeling as though you're starved, because the same thing is going to happen. and it's going to leave you, you know, in that kind of binge eating state. So while you were eating, you know, first off, you know, like we talked about in the slide with the study, eating at home, and I wish I could see. Right. So cook at home rather than eating out. So, you know, when you cook at home, there's smaller portion sizes without even thinking about it. And you have that sense of pride and creativity. I know when I cook something, you know, I've been literally bragging about next week's tofu bowl to everyone who will listen because it's so good. So if you're doing the meal plan, make sure you get excited for the tofu bowl next week. And if you don't like tofu, you can totally swap out chicken. But if you haven't tried tofu before, I highly recommend you try it because it's super bomb. So, you know, when you cook at home, it's naturally smaller portions, and you have that sense of pride and creativity, and then you can connect with your food. So really grow to appreciate your food and how, you know, it was raised and where it came from. And, you know, it's actually like a really cool thing, you know, going to a farm and seeing the plants grow from the ground that you can physically eat yourself rather than just, you know, getting a frozen meal and eating it. And not to say that that's not okay sometimes, because we all are pressed for time sometimes, but you know, allowing yourself to really connect with your food in that way, I think is really important. So another way to be more mindful at mealtime is really focusing on the taste of your food. And once again, I know these are such like simple things that we're like, that's so silly, but do you really do that at mealtime? Oops, I got some chat going on. So the next one I was starting to talk about was taking the time to focus on the taste of the food, the texture, and the smells and the process. So when you are eating your food, you know, physically sit here and think about like, what does this taste like? What does this feel like? Notice the textures, the smells, all of that. And while you're eating, you know, you're really appreciating your food, and you're allowing your body to absorb it and feel it and allow yourself to honor your hunger. So I know that's so silly kind of, but it's so important to appreciate your food when you're eating it. So chewing every bite fully, you know, I am 100% with you. Sometimes I'm so hungry, I just like inhale everything and don't taste it. But what is the point of that? We're eating because it's enjoyable too. So, you know, allowing yourself to enjoy that food is really important in mindful eating. So listening to your satiety cues. So, you know, I kind of talked about this in the last slide, but do you feel full? If you're full, stop eating, because we all know how it feels awful when you overeat. You're laying on the couch with a food baby. You're like, I can't move for an hour. I got stuff to do, but you're too full. You know, that's not fun. And I think to prevent that, because I think so many of us are instilled from a young age, like, don't waste food, don't waste food. Get out the Tupperware, put it away, and then you don't have to feel guilty about wasting it. But I have to say, wasting it on yourself is much worse than throwing it away, because then you're throwing away your time because you feel awful. You're laying here, you can't get anything done, all because you overate. So mindful eating, a huge component to that is listening to those satiety cues. And also how the food makes you feel. And this is something that I can tell you I've been making a note to recognize a lot more as I've gotten older. Because I want to feel my best. And a lot of foods, you know, we have sensitivities to them that they're unique to each individual, and it's hard to say. You know, me personally, I've noticed as I've gotten older, I absolutely have a dairy sensitivity. And I didn't really recognize it at first, but one day I was like, you know, every time I eat dairy, I feel like I have to take a nap afterwards. Like, I'm so tired. And then I was like, wait a minute, like, oh, it's what I'm eating. And I cut that out, and now I don't feel tired anymore. So I think a lot of people are really chronically tired and exhausted. And a lot of times it's just because they're eating something that their body just naturally doesn't agree with. And that's unique to everyone. And the only way you're going to find that out is by recognizing what you're eating and how it affects you and how you feel afterwards. And same goes with, like, you know, like if I eat a really heavy carbohydrate meal at lunchtime, I'm super sleepy, and it's just from all that heavy sugar rise. So me personally, I don't eat a lot of carbohydrates at lunch because I'm not trying to take a nap. Your girl has got to be productive. So that's not going to work. So honoring your health is the last one. So, you know, we don't want to have necessarily good foods and bad foods and, you know, be the food police, but you do want to have foods that honor your health and take care of you. And that's what this really all comes down to, rather than coming at this from a mentality of, I want to lose weight and be skinny and look a certain way. It's about loving your body, respecting your body, and knowing that taking care of your body and eating from a place of whole foods as often as you can is going to provide you with a longer and better quality of life, really. And you know, the last thing is that this isn't an all or nothing mentality. And that's, I say that all the time, you know, those crash diets, those are an all or nothing mentality. And I don't think that's sustainable for anyone to live by when you are like, I can only eat this for the rest of my life. That's not realistic. At some point, your brain physiologically is going to crave that one thing so badly because you've been depriving yourself of it that you're just going to lose control and then go into that cycle of shame again. And this is what that's about, breaking, is breaking that cycle of feeling shameful for eating something you have deemed as bad. There is no good, there is no bad, and you shouldn't feel bad if you do eat something that's bad because you were craving it and you deserved it. And then lastly, portion control. So, you know, as you know, our country has gotten older, portion sizes have quadrupled. It's absolutely astronomical. It's crazy. You go to, you know, a fast food restaurant and a small is like a large, like it's insane. So, you know, knowing proper portion sizes is important. And, you know, these are on this chart, I've got some typical, you know, like a bagel weighs 4 to 6 ounces and comprises your entire day's worth of grains, a typical bagel. And, you know, I remember when I was growing up, the bagels were just those tiny little ones. And now all you see is those big ones like what they have at Panera. A typical pasta portion is 3 cups, while the RDA is 1 cup. So 1 cup of pasta, who actually eats 1 cup of pasta? No one. I think you guys are, most of us are going to be in the category of the 3 cups. So we're really overdoing it there. And same with the steak. You know, most people eat that full 8 to 16 ounce steak, while the USDA recommendation is only 5.5 ounces. In 1955, fast food restaurants sold only 7-ounce sodas, and now a small is 16 ounces and a large is 30 ounces. So like I was saying, the portion sizes just keep growing and growing, and larger portions means larger calories. And I don't believe I ended up putting it in here, but a study was done with people who were given a smaller portion of food at a restaurant than the typical larger portion, and they felt just as satisfied, and they did not order any more food. The difference is it just wasn't put on their plate. So when you go to a restaurant and they put that massive serving of pasta on your plate, you're more likely to overeat because it's there in front of you and it's difficult for you to stop. And the same even goes for really anything. So a study was done with shampoo, and you know, you get those big bottles of shampoo, and they found that you get a bigger bottle, you're going to use more shampoo. Even though you don't need more shampoo, it's there, you're going to use more. And I think I'm guilty of this myself. I do that when I get a bigger bottle of shampoo or a conditioner. I'm like, might as well load up. So yeah, more food on the plate encourages more eating. Sure, no one has any comments. All right, so this is a great graphic for what I like to talk about, like a healthy, good balanced plate. And really the beauty of this is that you can fit anything into this plate. So we've got 50% veggies, 25% protein, and 25% carbohydrate, or like a grain or whatever. So I love this because, you know, that carbohydrate, it really could be like your mac and cheese or whatever else you're craving, but you're still getting a balanced meal and what your body needs. So, you know, this is like a good portion. And I like to say that a good meat portion is like the size of your fist. And I think that's, you know, like most men have bigger fists. So, hey, you get a little bit more meat. And I think in this whole mindful eating diet craze, men kind of get forgotten. But I think it's important to say that, you know, I think men in general are expected to eat more. So women were expected to eat nothing. Men, it's like the status quo, men are manly, they eat more food. So they really struggle with the mindful eating themselves because they're like, you know, they want to eat more, but they don't want to eat more because they know that that's too much and they're gaining weight and they don't want that. So really being mindful for them is just as important in determining how to eat. So, creating a healthy environment for eating is key in all of this. So making it really just easy for you, because when it's easy for you, you're going to maintain it. And if it's too much work, well, no thanks, right? So putting fresh fruits and vegetables in a bowl on your counter, these are just some really simple things you can do to make it easy for you. Putting whole foods front and center in your fridge. I always say this, in the path of least resistance. If your fruit and veggies are all stocked up in the fridge and, those cookies or whatever else are way up in the cabinet, you're going to be much more likely to grab for the veggies. And I also like to say, if you can eat your veggies first at mealtime, you're going to be much more likely to eat them because you're still, you're basically the least, you're not full yet, they're there, just eat them first and get it out of the way. Eliminate trigger foods. So while we are being mindful and we're not necessarily putting a good name or a bad name to any foods, the reality is that those hyper ultra processed foods kind of turn off that mental trigger in your brain that allows you to feel hunger and satiety. It kind of turns it off so that you just keep going and going and going, and you can't stop yourself. So eliminating any trigger foods. And it's a trigger food, whatever it is for any different person, is no different than any other addiction. For you, your drug of choice might be a certain type of food. For someone else, it's alcohol or drugs, and it's really no different. I don't like ever saying, you have to eliminate this from your life. But if it's something that's taking a hold of you in a way that you cannot control it, then I would say, maybe try eliminating it for a brief amount of time, maybe a month, and adding it back in and seeing how you can how you've regained control over that. And, seeing that you're coming to it from a place of knowing that you have control over whether you're eating that thing, not the food does not have control over you. And then using visual wisdom. So I like to call it that. So, basically making it look like you're having more. So bowls, actually, research has proven that when you eat out of a bowl, you feel like you're eating more than if you eat off of a plate, which is kind of funny. It has something to do with the fact that you can't see the edges. So eating out of a bowl or a smaller plate. So I have these plates that are like, maybe like 3/4 the size of a normal plate. And I love eating off of them because it actually allows me to eat like the exact perfect portion of food, because it's like you still fill up your plate and feel like you're eating a lot, but you're not overdoing it where we might typically do that with a full size plate where we fill the whole thing up and then are overfill. Using smaller utensils is another way to do this. Make half your plate produce. We already talked about that. Purchase single-size servings. I love those little individual guacamole and hummus packets. Those are the best. And they're just so convenient and easy. And you can always just make your own, you can buy the big one and make your own. Tupperware for leftovers, and choosing as many whole foods as possible. So the health halo effect. So this is kind of getting into like the confusion that's kind of going on with all this. People underestimate calories in foods perceived as low fat and actually eat more. So, when we see that something's labeled as low fat, we actually tend to overdo it with those items. And when adults and children and caretakers were given a plate of food and asked how many calories were in this plate of food, which was deemed fairly healthy, they actually underestimated it by 25%. 500 calories, I'm sorry. They underestimated it by 500 calories, which is a lot. And, when something is labeled small, you feel less guilty about it and you drink it. Or eat it. So a small movie drink is 30 ounces today, and that used to be a large back in the day. So here are some lifestyle habits that support healthy eating behaviors, and I'm sure none of these are that surprising to anyone. Optimizing your sleep. Sleep above everything else is so important, so incredibly important. Not getting adequate sleep is going to cause your stress levels to skyrocket. It's going to cause your cravings to skyrocket. So before dealing with anything else, trying to exercise, trying to do anything, get your sleep in check. Whatever you have to do, that is so incredibly important. And then next is obviously physical activity. And I like to look at physical activity as a good first step. when someone's trying to go on a healthy journey, not necessarily because exercising alone is going to make you healthy, but I think it really kind of makes everything else fall into place. You know, you exercise and you're like, oh, well, I exercise, so I'm gonna eat healthy today because I exercise today. So it kind of all goes hand in hand, I like to say. And, you know, back to this mindful and intuitive eating principle, the desire to exercise shouldn't come from the desire just simply to lose weight. It should come from a place of wanting to be healthier and have a healthy body, because your body deserves to move and it was designed to move. Managing stress, and stress goes hand in hand with the sleep thing. When you're stressed, that turns on your body's fight or flight mode. It doesn't understand what's going on. It just knows that it's panicking, and it sends off all those fat storage hormones and all of those increased craving hormones. So, you know, really managing stress, and we can talk about this over and over, you know, the meditation. And that's why I put that into you guys' New Year, New You packet, is meditating, you know, even just 3, 5, 7 minutes a day, whatever works for you, to kind of give you a calmer mind and more relaxed state is so important in helping managing your stress. And I love that Headspace app, because he kind of guides you through ways to be more resilient to anger or stress. You know, he kind of talks you through it and asks you to look at it from, you know, the outside and kind of see, where is this feeling coming from and how can you be more resilient and approach this situation from a place of calm next time. And I really enjoy that about meditation. So yeah, managing stress, and, you know, whatever works for you to do it. You know, for some people it might be exercise, but one size does not fit all. That's not going to work for everyone. Meditation isn't going to work for everyone. Maybe it's gardening for you. Maybe it's reading a book or the Bible or whatever it is for you. Amazing. But I think it's really important to kind of have that game plan in place of, what am I going to do when I'm stressed, rather than you know, binge eating or any other unhealthy behaviors. Supporting your gut health. And I think I'm going to do a webinar on this next week. We'll see. Don't take my word for that. But I'm thinking I want to do our next webinar on this, because gut health is so incredibly important. And I was just saying this to someone today, you know, you are not what you eat, you are what you absorb. So your gut is where all of your nutrients are absorbed, and your gut is actually called your second brain, because, you know, your gut controls your immune system. And by gut, I mean your digestive system. So your large intestine, your small intestine, your colons, this is your gut, so to speak. So the balance of good bacteria and bad bacteria in there controls how your nutrients are absorbed, your immune system, even your mental health. So gut health is incredibly important. So next week we'll talk a little bit about that, but eating foods rich in natural probiotics are so important. So, you know, we'll talk about that next week. I don't want to get too involved in that. But and then lastly, emotional eating. So I think everyone's been there. We've all been emotional eaters at some point in our life for whatever reason, whether it be eating because we're upset or not eating because we're upset. So, you know, cultivating coping skills for emotional eating is, you know, a really good way to tackle this. And this is, once again, you know, being self-aware and mindful and recognizing this habit within yourself is the first step. And then coming up with this game plan to kind of implement your game plan when you recognize that behavior in yourself. So, you know, if you are using food as a coping mechanism for an emotion, I think you need to be very mindful when you do it, and that's important. So, you know, recognizing, is this food making this situation feel better? If it is, then maybe keep going. But if it's not, why are you doing that? And, you know, finding alternative behaviors. So, you know, connection, calling your mom, going out to dinner with a friend, actions, going for a walk, lifting weights, taking a yoga class, soothing, listening to music, pleasure, chocolate chip cookies, whatever. So, you know, it's really up to you and your lifestyle, and that's important for you to discover within yourself, or I can work on that with you. So this is our last slide. So this, you know, this is really kind of like the gist of it all. Renewing your relationship with food, so, and yourself. So people with high self-compassion view the inevitable changes and setbacks that occur in the pursuit of health as a universal human experience, rather then becoming immersed in negative thoughts and feelings about the situation. So this is really saying, you know, okay, maybe you're trying to be healthy and not beating yourself up because you're not, everything's not going to plan, or you cannot get to that level of perfection that you want. And so, you know, letting go of that diet mentality, like we talked about, to prevent binge eating, which is so funny because it's like allowing yourself to have those things to prevent binging. Because a lot of times we view those foods that we might binge on as a reward. That's what we're taught from the time we're kids. Oh, you did your chores. Here's a M&M, you know, like when you're a little kid. So that's really, we've been taught to use food as a reward, and that's where this comes from. So a study was done, and subjects practiced mindful eating for 6 weeks and lost on average 9 pounds. You know, and it's not because of just mindful eating that they're losing this weight. It's because they're just recognizing their feelings of fullness and hunger and where their hunger is coming from, and therefore most likely eating less, because a lot of times we overeat when we're not being mindful, and that's where this weight loss comes from. So the scale is kind of like a love-hate relationship with me, and I take this on a case-by-case basis with every person. If you're someone that feels stressed weighing themselves, anxious, feels like that number on the scale is going to determine how your day goes, you know, it's a slippery slope. So if you're that type of person, I say do not weigh yourself. Don't focus on that, because the scale is not a predictor of health. It's really not a predictor of anything, because you could have just eaten too much high sodium food last night and you gained 5 pounds. It's all water. But here you are all freaking out, stressed out because of that. And that's what I always want to prevent. If you're someone that's going to be motivated by the scale, and maybe you see the scale not budge and you're like, that's it, I'm going to keep working out, it's not a big deal, it doesn't matter, or, you know, it's just something that you gauge your general health by, then go ahead and weigh yourself. You know, that's really something that you have to check in with yourself about. Avoiding that all or nothing mentality, like I talked about before. So feeling like I didn't eat healthy today, that's it, I'm never eating healthy again, everything's over, beating yourself up. That's not what this is about. We always want to, you know, just balance, moderation, and mindfulness. That's it. You know, another study was done with a low-fat diet versus a low-carb diet, with the keto, with the paleo, and really the X factor in determining the weight loss was not, you know, the single difference in the diets, because they're all very similar but slightly different. It was really actually when these people changed their relationship with food and learned to come come towards it from a place of non-judgment. So that's really my aim with this presentation, is that, you know, you're not so hard on yourself when maybe you don't eat so healthy, or you know, just being mindful and aware of your body and how foods make you feel. I think that's really important. So that is all for the presentation. I wanted to, what time is it? Oh shoot, 4:40. Okay, I want to touch on a couple things from the New Year, New You packet for those of you that are participating in it. I'm going to stop my screen share. So first off, contract. You don't have to send this to me, but I want you guys to sign it and use it as a way to hold yourself accountable. You know, the point of this is that, you know, you're going to have setbacks and you're going to have struggles, and you might not reach the goal that you intended to, but you sure as heck can try, right? And that's what this is about, and giving you the tools to do it. Like I said, do I plan on everyone following this to a T? No, not necessarily, but if you want to, this gives you that option and gives you kind of some ideas to go by and implement for the rest of forever, right? We've got all these recipes here. The meditation, I highly recommend you try. And the last thing I wanted to touch on was, two more things actually. I put a calendar at the back of the packet, this little guy. Use this to kind of keep track of what you've been doing. So, you know, fill in the color on the days that maybe you worked out, and over the month you can kind of see how the colors fill up. It's kind of fun. And then I've also been writing on mine like the days I meditated. So like 5 minutes here, 5 minutes here, whatever. Writing down what I did at the gym or whatever. Does anyone have any questions about like the workouts? Have you tried them? Were they hard? Were they easy? Anything like that? Oh, and then I was just gonna go over the workouts really quick. So basically what these are, you go down this column for 7 minutes and then you just keep repeating. So like you do all these exercises, then you go back and start up here times 7 minutes, okay? So that's basically what that is. I hope that's, you know, you guys understand that. And you don't even have to do just like this page. Like you could take one from here, you know, whatever you want. Or you could not do those at all. You could just go for a walk. I don't care. Whatever you want to do. So yeah, that's the gist of it. Get excited for week 2 because it's going to be so good. Smoothies. I hope you guys have a blender because I've been obsessing over smoothies lately. And I made these tofu bowls for lunch this week and they're so bomb. Like I said, that's them. They're amazing. So get excited. All right, that's it. Any questions? No? All right, well, everyone, thank you for joining me. Have a lovely day. I'm going to stop recording and I will be here to hang out if anyone has any questions just for a couple more minutes, okay? Thank you. So I'm going to stop.